You talk a lot about sense making and how the complexity in the world is increasing faster than we can cope with it. How can we mitigate that? What can we do about it?
Okay, so this is actually an extremely hard question. So I'm going to go ahead and just throw right down the middle. The way that we adapt to respond to our world actually goes through phases of punctuated equilibrium. And so at some point in the past, I don't know when, but let's call it at least 500 years ago and probably longer, probably even as late as the beginning of the Iron Age, human beings began to develop a neurocognitive psychological framework for responding to reality, a reality that changed at a certain pace. And I'm going to call this the paradigmatic mind. So the paradigmatic mind is a mind that creates a model of reality. It creates identities, it creates relationships, it creates heuristics, and it uses that to be able to have high quality models for how to respond to reality under most circumstances. So your job as a developing human under the paradigmatic mind is to build a paradigm, learn how to run that paradigm, and then as you become an adult, run it. And when the world is changing at a slow enough pace, this works pretty well. You know how to farm. You have a bunch of rituals on how to relate to society and to the world. There's a bunch of basic social contracts that everybody implicitly accepts. And a socially constructed set of paradigms is adequate to the problems you're facing. And then what ends up happening is that on some periodic basis, maybe once or twice during your life or 2 or 3 times during a century, there might be a major paradigm shift where a big chunk of the paradigm system doesn't work. It collapses. It feels like a big social crisis. The society kind of recoheres around some new model, and then you glue that onto the paradigm and you move forward. And over the past 1,000 years or so, civilization is preceded by a process of building and modifying paradigms through this sort of crisis recoherence approach. And that's been an adaptive enough capacity to enable us to get where we are, which is pretty impressive. The problem is that when the pace of change is faster than the ability of our paradigm mind to adapt paradigms, you're going through paradigm collapses too frequently to ever cohere, and you actually end up in a situation of complete confusion. You literally can't make sense of your environment anymore because the thing that you use to make sense is you can't trust it because you expect that it's going to be breaking or collapsing in unpredictable ways too often. And I would say that's actually a fair mapping of what's going on in the world right now. So many things are happening that appear to be surprises and this is because the environment is changing faster than the entire architecture of the paradigmatic mind can adapt to the environment. So what that means is we actually have to build an entirely different model of psychology, an entirely different model of modeling reality, and which is to say a new mind. Now, this new mind is going to have a very different relationship to other humans or other sentients and a very different relationship to reality, which I think a lot of us, certainly a lot of the younger generations, I think intuitively get a sense for because it's going to be an intrinsically collective intelligence. And by that I mean there won't be a strong sense of individuals having any degree of responsibility for really understanding the world. Like there won't be an idea that I as an individual really ever even try to believe that I understand the world very much. My responsibility is to maintain a really high quality sense of how clearly I am perceiving reality. So this has to do with this concept of sovereignty, which I'll explicate in a moment because I think it'll be important for this conversation. And then how effectively I can share that perspective with truth and clarity out into some kind of collective space, some shared space of insight. And then what will end up happening is that we will be constantly cohering groups of sentients. And by sentience, I mean both humans and increasingly capable machines, when and as if needed around particular problem domains, sharing our distinct perspectives, beginning to form an actual collective intelligence in that particular location, which collective intelligence is adequate to the scope of the real space, whatever it might be. And then once that is resolved, we'll then artifact that as effectively as possible, and then we'll decohere. So, the 3 of us might gather. We'll then figure out how to come into coherence by establishing various protocols for communication and understanding how each of us shares our perspective until we've got enough clarity that then we're really effectively have cohered into a collective intelligence. And then that thing has a certain capacity, which is vastly more than any of the three of us as individuals. But then what will happen is that we'll decohere. I'll go away. I'll go do something else. And getting extremely good at flowing between these coherences and decoherences, at orienting yourself towards the place where your energy and perspective is the most needful now, and entering into coherence quickly and fluidly with potentially extremely heterogeneous sentience is going to be the nature what this new mind looks like.